Yo, what up? I forgot to bring my speaker down here, yo. Oi, oi, oi.
Connected to FBI wiretap.
Borders. So we would have to assess carefully whether the evidence recommends any steps beyond the thoroughly tested methods I just described. I know this playbook well because I was in the same building here in the 2000s, serving as general counsel and then as deputy secretary alongside some of these very same fine scientists and public health officials when we responded to the SARS outbreak, monkeypox, anthrax attacks, pandemic flu preparedness, and a number of other infectious threats. That has given me a deep appreciation for the institutions that oversee our response. The United States has the world's finest public health system. We've been monitoring this virus and preparing a response since back in December. But it's more than that. Preparing for these kinds of outbreaks is part of the daily life at HHS and for America's public health professionals. Preparedness is a day job around here. We are constantly making investments, training personnel at all levels, carrying out simulations and exercises, and sharing information. This commitment goes straight to the top. The President and I have been speaking regularly about this outbreak, and I have been speaking with the senior officials at HHS at the White House multiple times each day since the outbreak began to represent an international threat. The President is highly engaged in this response and closely monitoring the work we're doing to keep Americans safe. I'll give you a brief sense of the work being done across HHS beyond the CDC activities that I've mentioned. Our Emergency Response Arm, the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response, or ASPR, is assessing the level of preparedness we have with the Strategic National Stockpile, which includes pharmaceuticals and other necessary medical supplies. HHS's Administration for Children and Families is working with the State Department to assist any Americans who will need assistance being repatriated to the United States. NIH, ASPR, and FDA are pursuing research into and assessing the possibilities for vaccines, diagnostics, and therapeutics, which is necessarily a longer-term project. In addition to the work being done in government, there are basic precautions all Americans can take. Healthcare providers should be on the lookout for patients with travel history to China, especially Hubei province, and for relevant symptoms. Late on Monday, the CDC and the State Department issued a Level 3 travel advisory for all of China. This higher level of alert means that Americans should reconsider or postpone travel to any part of China. The State Department has also maintained what they call a Level 4 warning for Hubei, meaning Americans should not travel there. In closing, I'll remind the American people one more time. We are working hard to keep you safe. We are constantly preparing for the possibility that the situation could worsen, and your health and safety has been and will be our top priority. To discuss more about the current state of the epidemiology and CDC's work, I will now hand things over to CDC's Director, Dr. Robert Redfield. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and thank all of you for joining us here today as we discuss the latest developments that are involved in this situation. It is a rapidly changing situation in the United States and throughout the global community. Right now, we know of 18 international locations that have identified cases of this new virus, including the United States. To better protect the health of the American public during the emergence of this novel coronavirus, and based on the evolving information from China, CDC has reassessed its entry strategy and decided to expand to screening travelers from the 5 airports originally to 20 airports in the United States. My thoughts and prayers are with all the healthcare providers and frontline responders that are handling this public health threat, as well as the people of China. I know that many Americans may be worried about the virus, and I wanted to let them know a few things that they can do. Everyone has a role to play in helping contain the spread of this virus. CDC, in conjunction with the State Department, has updated our travel guidance and now recommends that travelers avoid unnecessary travel to China. It's currently the flu season and respiratory disease season, and there's a lot of respiratory disease out in our nation. We recommend washing of the hands, covering your mouth when you cough, staying at home if you're sick. For healthcare providers, we ask them to be on the lookout for people with a travel history from China, especially Hubei province, if they develop fever and respiratory symptoms. And if you're a healthcare provider that's caring for a confirmed patient, we ask you to follow the recommended infection control procedures. For all people that may have this infection, we ask you to follow the CDC guidance on how to reduce the risk of spreading your illness to others. And for people who have may had close contact with someone who was a confirmed patient, we ask them also to follow that guidance, and if you have symptoms, to contact your healthcare provider. Right now, there is no spread of this virus in our communities here at home. This is why our current assessment is that the immediate health risk of this new virus to the general public
How is there no spread when there's more than one case?
is low in our nation. The coming days and weeks are likely to bring more confirmed cases here and around the world, including the possibility of some person-to-person spread. But our goal of the ongoing U.S. public health response is to contain this outbreak and prevent sustained spread of the virus in our country. Now I'd like to turn over this briefing to Dr. Nancy Messonnier, who is the director of CDC's National Center for Immunization and Respiratory Diseases.
Thank you, Dr. Redfield. I want to take a few minutes and let you know what the CDC teams on the ground in Arizona, California, Illinois, and Washington State have been doing to assist the state and local public health department contact investigations. Contact investigation means tracing everyone who comes in direct contact with the confirmed case of this new virus. It's essential that we detect illness among contacts in order to make sure that if these contacts are infected, they get the best and most appropriate care, and they understand what steps they must take to prevent spreading of the illness to others. Contacts are watched for signs of illness for multiple days after the last day that they were in contact with a patient. If the contact develops a fever or respiratory symptoms, they will be tested to see if they are also infected. Right now, we have only a handful of patients with this new virus in the United States. We're conducting contact tracing for every one of those patients because we still think this strategy will allow us to contain the outbreak. I want to thank the patients here in the U.S. that have this new virus, as well as their close contacts, for their cooperation during these investigations. I also want to take a minute to thank our public health colleagues at the state and local level, as well as all the healthcare staff who have been caring for these patients. Our ability to coordinate and react this quickly is entirely dependent on those collaborations. The we here is not CDC in isolation, but our state, local, and territorial partners, as well as other federal agencies. As Dr. Redfield said, right now we think the risk to the general public in the United States is low. But risk is dependent on exposure, and while the vast majority of Americans will not have any exposure, some people will, and therefore will be at greater risk of infection. For example, healthcare workers caring for patients with confirmed infection and other close contacts. They need to be vigilant, and the people around them need to be vigilant. As the Secretary said, there is much we need to learn. Every day we learn more, and every day we assess to see if our guidance or our response can be improved. As this response evolves, CDC will continue its aggressive public health response strategy, working to protect the health and safety of the American public. I'll now turn it over to Dr. Fauci.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Nancy, I'm going to give you a brief snapshot of the countermeasures in the form of diagnostics, therapeutics, and vaccines that are being investigated and pursued by the NIH, by our grantees, contractors, and by our collaborators in industry. First, with regard to diagnostics, the CDC has rapidly developed a diagnostic based on the published sequence of the virus. The NIH, together with the CDC, will be working on next-generation diagnostics that are more point of care so that we can get them more distributed to people throughout the country and the world. Next is therapeutics. There is no proven therapy for coronavirus infection. Yet there are now ongoing studies that have been initiated with the previous experience we had with SARS and with MERS. For example, back then and between those outbreaks and the current one, a number of antiviral drugs have been tested in vitro, in some animal models, and even in the field, anecdotally with historic controls. One of them is the antiviral remdesivir, which some of you may remember was used as one of the elements in the clinical trial against Ebola. And the other one that is now being used on a compassionate basis by some in China is Kaletra, which is a combination of two antiretroviral drugs. Again, I must emphasize, there's no proven efficacy of these, but they are being pursued together with the screening of a number of other agents. I might point out that is why it is so important that we get isolates of the virus, which we will soon have, both particularly from the individuals in this country who have now been infected, the 5 individuals that you've heard of. The other is monoclonal antibodies. When we were dealing with SARS, we developed monoclonal antibodies as potential therapeutics. Again, no proven therapy because they were not used. They were only used in vitro and animal models. Given the somewhat close homology between SARS and the new novel coronavirus, there could be some cross-reactivity there that could be utilized. However, what we're really trying to do, and we will have it soon, as we get specimens from individuals who are infected, that we will then be able to clone their B cells and make specific monoclonal antibodies against the novel coronavirus. And then finally, and most importantly, vaccines. We have already started at the NIH and with many of our collaborators on the developing of a vaccine. The one at the NIH that I'll just mention very briefly is in collaboration with a company called Moderna, and the platform is a messenger RNA platform. When the Chinese isolated the virus, they put on a public database the sequence. Given the technology of the 21st century, we were able to use that sequence, pull out the gene for the glycoprotein spike of the particular coronavirus, and make that the immunogen to be used in a vaccine. Right now, that's being prepared. I anticipate, with some cautious optimism, that we will be in a phase 1 trial within the next 3 months. I want to emphasize, because it's sometimes confused, going into a phase 1 trial does not mean that you have a vaccine that's ready for deployment. It will take 3 months to get into the trial, 3 months to get safety and immunogenicity data, and then you move into phase 2. What we do from that point on will be determined by what has happened with the outbreak over those months. Remember, we made a phase 1 trial with SARS, and we never had to use a vaccine. But nonetheless, we are proceeding as if we will have to deploy a vaccine. In other words, we're looking at the worst scenario, that this becomes a bigger outbreak. So in summary, there are 3 types of interventions that we're working on: diagnostics, therapeutics, and vaccines. And we will keep you posted as we make progress in each of these. Thank you.
Really?
Thank you very much, Dr. Fauci, Dr. Redfield, Dr. Messonnier. At this point, we have time for questions from the media on the topic of the novel coronavirus. So, Ricardo, if you want to get us started?
Yes.
If you'll wait a second just because of the live streaming to get a microphone before you ask your question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Ricardo Alonso Zaldivar with AP. And my question, could you please update us on what is known about the asymptomatic transmission? In other words, people catching it from somebody who doesn't show symptoms. And could you also tell us how long after a person is exposed does it take for the testing to pick up the virus?
Let me ask Dr. Messonnier to take that.
Sure, thank you. And those are really important questions. There have been isolated reports of asymptomatic infection from several countries. Those are countries that only have a few cases, as opposed to, for example, in China, where the majority of cases are. we're looking at that data closely. It's important to know that right now in the United States, we have only 5 cases, and we have no evidence of human-to-human transmission from those cases. Those cases themselves traveled to China, and so that's an example of direct transmission from China. But that's something we're watching closely, and obviously as more information becomes available, we would have to change our operations if indeed that was a significant issue. In terms of how long it will take from the time that you're infected to develop a positive test, what I can tell you so far is that the patients that we've seen in the U.S. have tested positive and we're following them. But the way that we're looking at close contacts is by doing more than one test so that we can understand if, for example, we pick them up initially and they're not infected, and then later on they go on to develop disease. As many of you know, that is something we do see in other infections where there is a period of time early where you have mild symptoms before you go on to more significant disease. The PCR test that we have, we've really rapidly turned around from having sequences available online to being able to get a PCR. It's a testament to CDC laboratorians' ability to do something really rapidly, and I'm proud of them. But as Dr. Fauci said, we're going to continue to work on other diagnostics that can also help us to understand better the spectrum of illness.
Thank you very much.
Everything they're saying is, I don't know. I don't know. We're trying to figure it out. No matter what question the media asks, their best bet is to say, we don't know. We're working on it.
How about with the leather jacket here?
Thank you. Robert Delaney with the South China Morning Post. I just wanted to follow up on media reports that the White House is considering travel restrictions from China to the U.S. And the other question I had was about the offer for the CDC team to support a solution by working with the health authorities in China. Can you give us some more information about what the response from China has been to that and who has been involved in that interaction? Thank you.
So in terms of travel restrictions, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, it's important to not take anything off the table with a rapidly emerging novel infectious disease. We will be constantly assessing the appropriate public health measures to be taken based on the science, evidence, and epidemiology that we learn, including some important information, as Dr. Messonnier spoke about and as I spoke about in my opening, that we hope to learn by working on the ground in China as quickly as possible so we can see raw data, raw evidence, and help design the types of studies and analytics that really are needed. That leads to your second question, which is the offer that we have made, which we do hope that the Chinese government will take us up on, that CDC experts are standing by, ready, willing, able to go immediately to China, either on a bilateral basis or under the auspices of the World Health Organization. So I have been directly engaged in those discussions with Minister Ma, the Chinese Minister of Health, as well as with the Director General Tedros of the World Health Organization. And Director General Tedros just had meetings this morning in China, so what would be Tuesday morning in China, with senior-most officials. I found my interactions with the Chinese government to be very productive and cooperative, and I am hopeful that we'll have a positive resolution and be able to deploy, especially under the auspices of the World Health Organization. One thing that we can do is, in fact, let me ask Dr. Messonnier to talk a bit about what we do, or Dr. Redfield, what we do when our teams go, how we provide assistance with the CDC.
Currently, we do have a CDC office in China that's embedded in the China CDC. We would add our personnel there to help them really define the epidemiology and answer some of the critical questions that were asked about asymptomatic transmission, for example, in particular, and what is the incubation period, since there's been such a wide range. We also can assist them to begin to understand really the spectrum of infection. We've developed a diagnostic test that we can use to actually tell after the fact when somebody has actually recovered, were they actually infected or not. So this is the critical thing we do. We augment laboratory support, but most importantly, we augment the epidemiology capacity to answer these critical questions that are so necessary to understand for future public health action.
Thank you, Dr. Redfield. In the green there.
Is there talk of appointing someone to a coronavirus czar role?
So at this point, this is a public health issue. Our department is leading this effort. It's a public health matter. It is what we do. It's our day job, is preparedness and response for public health matters. We are tightly coordinated across the interagency throughout the federal government. So as other departments, whether Homeland Security, State Department, Transportation, Commerce, we're all working together in a very transparent way under the leadership of the National Security Advisor. So there's a full interagency process, but the lead right now is very much a public health preparedness and response activity led by HHS. Thank you. How about there in that? Nope. And then we'll go to you.
Chia Ching with United News Group Taiwan. Secretary, Taiwan has confirmed 8 cases already, but Taiwan is excluded by WHO. Would you be concerned that Taiwan may not be able to receive the latest updates from WHO? And how would U.S. enhance cooperation with Taiwan on this matter? Thank you.
Thank you. So we always work to ensure close collaboration with Taiwan. This is a public health matter, not a political matter in any way, and certainly work to ensure the technical expertise and exchange of information happens. And as the United States can help to support that effort, we certainly continue that. And then,
Hey, Mr. Secretary, Lev Vashel, Stat. You said more transparency and more cooperation from the Chinese government was the best response. So beyond allowing the CDC team to join them there, what measures would you like to see that government take that it hasn't yet?
So first, having lived through the SARS episode, I can say that the posture of the Chinese government, levels of cooperation and interaction with us is completely different from what we experienced in 2003, and I want to commend them for that. They are still obviously learning, just as we are, about a rapidly emerging infectious disease situation. But getting WHO, CDC experts on the ground to be able to assist the Chinese experts, this is a major issue, major public health issue, and we basically just need the best public health people we have in the world working on this right now. And so getting them there to do the types of work that Dr. Redfield and Dr. Messonnier have spoken about. In addition, as Dr. Fauci mentioned, the more actual isolates that we can get, actual live isolates we can get, the more robust we can ensure any therapeutics or vaccines would be, more targeted on top of the genetic sequences that has been shared. I mean, it is excellent that China put the genetic sequencing online and complied with the international health regulations work. That was what enabled our teams at the CDC. This is really a historic accomplishment. Within 1 week, the CDC had invented a rapid diagnostic test. Within weeks, we have a candidate vaccine out of NIAID that we're working on. This is really remarkable, and that rests on a foundation of transparency and collaboration under the international health regulations, sharing genetic sequencing and isolates. Thank you. Yes, please, Tony.
Yeah, the other thing is in the area of research. I mean, everyone appropriately is concentrating on the public health aspects of it, which are absolutely critical. But we've been collaborating with Chinese scientists. Many of them have actually trained in the United States. So it would really be very nice if we could get more open interaction, not only in a public health arena, but also on sharing research data and research endeavors. So it's a combination of the two.
Just right here in front here. Yes. I'll wait for the mic, please. We'll get that.
Yeah, hi. This is Issam Ahmed from Agence France Presse. Obviously, we're in a containment mode and firefighting mode right now with regards to the coronavirus and learning more and diagnosing. But on a broader level, what does this new coronavirus tell you about coronaviruses in general and how we can contain them with regards to keeping wild animal markets and consuming those wild animals? Should this be the focus so that we're not always looking for the next coronavirus which is about to come out?
Maybe Dr. Redfield. Thank you for your question. I think first I want to say that it's really important, although we know a lot about SARS and we know a lot about MERS, we really don't know a lot about this new coronavirus. And I would be reluctant to encourage people to translate knowledge from those two viruses to this virus. That's the first thing that I would say. So as we learn, for example, we don't actually know how this virus jumped into man. Bats are the most common, source of these viruses in general, so that's the larger assumption. But what was there a second vehicle or not? And if so, what it was? Like MERS, it's camels. So I think we're still learning, and we're trying to, we're going to sort of stay where the data is. But I would just caution us from taking lessons from MERS as a pathogen and lessons from SARS and say, okay, we know, because neither of those, for example, had significant asymptomatic transmission. And as was alluded to, we're trying to figure out, is that just a rare event or is it more? So again, I think we just have to wait and see what we learn over the next couple of weeks.
The black blouse? Yep, you. Thank you.
Hi, Brianna Ely from Politico. I was just wondering if you guys are considering declaring a public health emergency for the outbreak?
Yep. So we have various authorities that we use. One of them, as you mentioned, is Section 319 of the Public Health Service Act, which is a public health emergency. I will use that authority whenever it's recommended by our public health officials that they believe any incident is of sufficient stature to invoke it, as well as when the authorities implicated by that are necessary. I think it's very important to remember where we are right now. We have 5 cases in the United States, each of those individuals with direct contact with Wuhan, and no person-to-person transmission in the United States. But I won't hesitate at all to invoke any authorities I need to ensure that we're taking all steps to protect the American people. Don't hesitate in the least, but I'll do it when it's appropriate under the standards that we have and the authorities that I need. Yes, in the front here.
Wendy Jones, NBC. When will the additional airport screenings start? And the current charter plane returning from Wuhan with Americans, will those people go into quarantine in California, and for how long?
Let me ask Dr. Messonnier if you could take as much of that as you'd like.
Let me take the first part, which is, as you know, we have been over the past week doing enhanced screening at 5 airports, specifically around travelers returning from Wuhan. What we're doing is expanding our activities to 20 quarantine stations and really building on our regular day-to-day activities at those quarantine stations. So our regular activities at quarantine stations focus on identifying ill patients, and that's what we're going to be doing here, identifying ill travelers returning from China so that we can make sure that they're appropriately treated so that they don't pass on this illness to others. But also, it's an incredibly important opportunity for us to educate those returning travelers about the signs and symptoms of this coronavirus. They are an important part of the equation.
The lady said, when are you going to start the new screenings? Okay, you're screening at 5 airports now. You say you're going to add 15 more airports to the list and make it 20. When? When are the other airports going to start screening?
We want travelers to understand that even if they don't have symptoms when they come back to the United States, if they develop symptoms, they should contact their healthcare provider immediately. So that's a really important part of this expansion, identification of ill passengers, but an opportunity to educate them so that they can be part of helping us contain this disease.
And then with regard to the flight.
But it still never said when. You ain't got to tiptoe around no questions, yo. Let me just make sure that was the question, because am I tripping?
Wendy Jones, NBC. When will the additional airport screenings start?
When will the additional airport screenings start? That was the question.
And the current charter plane returning from Wuhan with Americans, will those people go into quarantine in California, and for how long?
Let me ask Dr. Messonnier if you could take as much of that as you'd like.
Okay, so I heard that report that they have a plane over in Wuhan with American citizens. It's a full plane. It's like 100 people. They're trying to get back over here to America. But flights are so restricted right now. Like, I think they said their flight is going to leave 10 a.m. China's time. I guess it would be today or tomorrow, like whatever. Whenever it's 10 o'clock in the morning in China, that's when the flight is supposed to be on its way back over here. And so the lady said when will you start screening at the additional airports? And when the charter flight from Wuhan arrives here, are they going to be quarantined in California, and for how long? Very simple questions. Really simple. I don't think this lady even answered that shit, yo. Why didn't you just say, I don't know?
With direct contact with Wuhan and no person-to-person transmission in the United States. But I won't hesitate at all to invoke any authorities I need to ensure that we're taking all steps to protect the American people. Won't hesitate in the least, but I'll do it when it's appropriate under the standards that we have and the authorities that I need. Yes, in the front here.
Wendy Jones, NBC. When will the additional airport screenings start? And the current charter plane returning from Wuhan with Americans, will those people go into quarantine in California, and for how long?
Let me ask Dr. Messonnier if you could take as much of that as you'd like.
Sure. Let me take the first part, which is, as you know, we have been over the past week doing enhanced.
Let me take the first part. When will the screening start? Well, as you know, over the past weeks, bitch, all you had to do was say we plan on starting screening at more airports starting on Thursday afternoon, Friday morning. That's not even an exact time, but it's a more definitive time than what she's trying to say. Like she already danced around the whole question. Let me take that. Let me take the first part.
Let me take the first part, which is, as you know, we have been over the past week doing enhanced screening at 5 airports, specifically around travelers returning from Wuhan. What we're doing is expanding our activities to 20 quarantine stations and really building on our regular day-to-day activities at those quarantine stations. So our regular activities at quarantine stations focus on identifying ill patients, and that's what we're going to be doing here, identifying ill travelers returning from China so that we can make sure that they're appropriately treated so that they don't pass on this illness to others. But also it's an incredibly important opportunity for us to educate those returning travelers about the signs and symptoms of this novel coronavirus. They are an important part of the equation. We want travelers to understand that even if they don't have symptoms when they come back to the United States, if they develop symptoms, they should contact their healthcare provider immediately. So that's a really important part of this expansion, identification of ill passengers, but an opportunity to educate them so that they can be part of helping us contain this disease.
And then with regard to the flight of individuals who are connected to the U.S. Embassy consulate in Wuhan returning with family members, we will be heavily engaged with that flight and the transport of those individuals. They'll be screened, evaluated constantly. There will be physicians on the flight. And we'll take whatever the appropriate evidence-based public health measures are with them as we would in any other situation. So that'll all be dependent on what we learn as we screen, speak to people, as we do the type of evaluation we would do in any type of infectious disease contact tracing type activity. In the back there with Ty.
Neither one of those people answered her question, yo. She said, when will you start screening at the airports? And the people who are coming back from China, who are coming to America, are they going to be quarantined in California? And for how long? She ain't getting none of that shit answered. They danced all around that shit just now. Can't miss my meeting. I gotta go back to work.
Hi, Jason Barty from Think Global Health. I wanted to ask about the rapid diagnostic test. Is it going to be used for routine screening, and can you comment on the efficacy of the diagnostic, given that the rapid flu test produces false negatives, I've read?
Yeah, thanks for allowing me to clarify. This isn't the same thing as a rapid flu test. calling it a rapid test, but sort of it's technically an RT-PCR, a rapid real-time PCR. This is a test that is much more sensitive and specific than some of the rapid flu tests. Right now, it's only available at CDC, and that's really
we become ignorant to nature on a broad spectrum. We become ignorant to nature, and that shit has killed our immune system. Like, it's a double whammy. Like, your body can't fight off like a bunch of regular shit that's in the fucking world, shit that's in the dirt or on animals and shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, your body has no defenses against this shit now. And then if you're actually stuck out in the fucking wilderness somewhere, you don't know what fucking plants and berries to eat or none of that shit, man. Motherfucker, just so far from nature, bro. We're kind of fucked.
Because before we roll it out to our local partners, we want to make sure that it is as good as possible. You know, developing a rapid test this quickly is hard. And if we're going to pull it out farther than CDC, we want to be sure that it has appropriate sensitivity and specificity. In this kind of situation, is it exceedingly important that we don't misdiagnose somebody and say that they don't have disease when they do, or alternatively, scare them when we do so unnecessarily. We are moving as quickly as possible to get that test closer to where the patients are, and I expect that to be available more locally in a week or two. And then hopefully, eventually, as Dr. Fauci was talking about, there'll be more availability of these tests through other means. But the CDC test, as quickly as possible, we're getting it more local.
In the back there next to Yasmin? Yep, thank you.
Hi, Lenny Bernstein, the Post. Over the weekend, there began to be concerns about containment within China. What's the latest thinking on that? Are you feeling any different than, say, Saturday or Sunday about the possibility of this being contained within China? And given how few infections are outside the country and no deaths, does that tell us anything about the lethality of the virus?
So it's obviously spreading rapidly within China. I think at this point, I believe close to 50% of the new cases are outside of the Wuhan province, where we've been focused on. But let me ask Hubei province with Wuhan in it. Let me ask Dr. Redfield if he could talk a bit about the evolving nature of the disease over the days.
It's clear that the outbreak in China is continuing. I think those of you who are following the case numbers know there was, I think, almost 1,700 new reported cases in the last 24 hours. I think you've also seen from the China response that they've mixed, and we talk about this word containment and mitigation. It's not like there's a point where you switch from one to the other. We integrate the two, and China's clearly moved to a number of mitigation strategies that, advising or canceling public large events and large gatherings. Obviously, a lot of what they've done in terms of changing travel areas. So I think clearly at this stage we have an ongoing
Yeah, that's something else too. Y'all motherfuckers keep matches around? Like, just little simple shit like this, yo. I got like packs and packs of matches and candles. I gotta have matches, candles, flashlights, and batteries. Just like normal little shit, yo. You never know when you're gonna need this shit, bro. Anybody need proof? We need proof. Deadly virus from an animal. Like, but then like I was just talking to my homie right before I started the stream. That's what kind of took me so long to start back streaming. I was fixing my dinner too, but like one of my friends, one of the smartest people I know. And he's written a whole book on health and how the government tries to manipulate our health. And so I was asking him about this shit, and he was like, dude, I'm not too worried about it. And like, we all know, like, every year it is something. SARS, Zika, swine flu, the bird flu, West Nile virus, Ebola. Like every year they scare us with one of these things. And so my homie was like, dude, it's just the same shit, just like the Ebola virus. Y'all remember that shit? Ebola was scary as fuck for like 2 or 3 weeks. And then after that, like nobody talk about Ebola no more. That shit just like, yeah, whatever. But Ebola was supposed to kill everybody. And he was like, this is gonna be the same shit, man. This fucking coronavirus is gonna get blown out of proportion, and in a couple weeks, we're not gonna even be talking about this shit. And I was like, you know what, bro? That makes me feel really good, yo. Like, that, you know, that positive perspective made me feel good. But then he was like, you know, they could have cried wolf so many times that we not paying attention no more. And this time, it really might be a wolf. And I'm like, fuck. Hey, that's why I stream, man. I do it for the people. But yeah, I'm just hoping this isn't that time where it is a actual wolf. How did the story, the little boy who cried wolf was a sheep herder or something, and he just kept playing jokes on adults like, help, it's a wolf. And they would come running with their, I think they said axes, or it's an old story. They don't even know if they had guns or whatever. They would come with their axes and bows, or I don't fucking know. And there would be no wolf, and the little boy kept crying wolf and make everybody come running. And then there wouldn't be a wolf. But then one time a wolf really came. And he's like, help, it's a wolf, it's a wolf. And the motherfucker was like, dude, man, fuck that shit, man. I'm not running down there and keep fucking with your crazy ass talking about it's a wolf. And then the wolf ate the little motherfucker. Now it's like, is this that one fucking time where, SARS wasn't nothing, the swine flu wasn't shit, Ebola wasn't nothing, you know, the coronavirus, this ain't gonna be nothing, and then it really is something. Like something major, something like population shifting.
Outbreak in China, we need to continue to watch. There clearly now is evidence of human-to-human transmission outside of that one province. There's now over 30 provinces in China that report cases. So again, this is one of the reasons we're hopeful that we can get our experts in to work alongside to help try to get a handle on helping them with their broader containment strategy. But I do think it's a merged thing between and what they're doing from containment and how they're starting to do certain mitigation strategies.
I'm in the front here. Then we'll go here first in the front, and then the other front.
Hi, Tom Rousey, ABC 7 News. I had a question. Drugstores are reporting they've had a run on people buying masks to protect themselves. Is that helpful at all?
No, it's not. It is unnecessary. As we said, in the United States, the risk to any individual American is extremely low. We are taking the steps to be prepared for this. We are taking aggressive action, but the individual American, this should not be an impact on their day-to-day life. And so that would be an unnecessary step. Thank you. And that will go.
What is the proper, Peter Nicholas from The Atlantic, what is the proper role for the U.S. president in the face of a disease like this, and what is the message that he should be communicating right now?
Well, I think for any of us, the proper role is to ensure that we're being open and transparent. The mantra we want to have is that we're giving you the information we have when we have it, so that you and the American public know what we're learning, know how we're thinking, how we're addressing the problem. And we want to, it's always a balance. It's very difficult to make predictions with an emerging infectious disease. Viruses are unpredictable. And so that's why the message is a potentially very serious health issue. But at the moment, there's nothing individual Americans should be worried about, but that's at the moment. And just know that you have the most experienced team in the world on this, prepared on this. This is what we do at the Department of Health and Human Services, as well as our other partners in the interagency. Thank you. Let me go right there. Yes. Oh.
Hi.
That's right. We'll get both.
Jeannie Van with Bloomberg Law. I was wondering, with the 20 quarantine, the expansion to 20 airports, what percentage of passengers you're able to get to screen coming in from China, if there are plans still to screen all passengers from China, and when you might make a decision on that, if you're planning to do so.
So I'll ask Dr. Messonnier to clarify on this, but it's important to remember the first 5 airports were the airports where most of the flights directly from Wuhan to the United States came into, and those individuals received active interview, screening, et cetera, as well as educating for any follow-on disease or symptoms that they might have. The expansion to the 20 airports, now there are no longer flights coming from Wuhan to the United States. At this point, these 20 quarantine stations are our active quarantine stations. We have enhanced staffing there. And at those quarantine stations, we monitor for any signs of illness from any individual coming from China, but also just generally, we're always on the lookout. That's what we do, on the lookout for anyone coming into the country who's presenting signs and symptoms of disease, working very closely with our partners at Customs and Border Patrol, for instance, as well as information received from pilots or flight attendants, crews of airliners. Let me ask Dr. Messonnier if there's any other clarification on that.
Just maybe the clarification that think of screening as part of a layered approach that we use to protect Americans. And so screening at the airport is an opportunity to identify ill passengers.
So they're not saying that they're going to... They said that they were screening and quarantining at 5 airports, and they're going to expand it to 20 locations. Is that what they're saying? Or because they're not saying it's going to be 20 more different airports. He just said 20 different quarantine locations.
Individual Americans should be worried about, but that's at the moment. And just know that you have the most experienced team in the world on this, prepared on this. This is what we do at the Department of Health and Human Services, as well as our other partners in the interagency. Thank you.
Advising or canceling public large events and large gatherings. Obviously, a lot of what they've done in terms of changing travel areas. So I think clearly at this stage we have an ongoing outbreak in China. We need to continue to watch. There clearly now is evidence of human-to-human transmission outside of that one province alongside to help try to get a handle on helping them with...
I'm in the front here. Oh, yeah, then we'll go here first in the front, and then the other front.
Hi, Tom Rousey, ABC 7 News. I had a question. Drugstores are reporting they've had a run on people buying masks to protect themselves. Is
aggressive action, but the individual American does
a role for the U.S. president in the face of a disease?
Transparent. We want the mantra. We want how we're addressing the problem, and we want to. It's always a balance. It's very difficult to make predictions with an emerging infectious disease. Viruses are unpredictable, and so that's why the message is a potentially very serious health issue. But at the moment, there's nothing individual Americans should be worried about, but that's at the moment. And just know that you have the most experienced team in the world on this, prepared on this. This is what we do at the Department of Health and Human Services, as well as our other partners in the interagency. Thank you. Let me go right there. Yes. Oh.
Hi.
That's right. We'll get both.
Jeannie Van with Bloomberg Law. I was wondering, with the 20 quarantine, the expansion to 20 airports, what percentage of passengers you're able to get.
See, now she started off by saying 20 quarantines, but the expansion to 20 airports. So which one is it? Is it just 20 quarantine zones where they're holding people at? Or are all these locations specifically airports that have airstrips and planes landing in and out? Like, that's what I can't figure out. Are they quarantining the airports, or taking people from 5 airports and dispersing them out to 20 different quarantine locations?
Hi.
That's right. We'll get both.
Jeannie Van with Bloomberg Law. I was wondering, with the 20 quarantine, the expansion to 20 airports, what percentage of passengers you're able to get to screen coming in from China, if there are plans still to screen all passengers from China, and when you might make a decision on that, if you're planning to do so.
So I'll ask Dr. Messonnier to clarify on this, but it's important to remember the first 5 airports were the airports where most of the flights directly from Wuhan to the United States came into, and those individuals received active interview, screening, et cetera, as well as educating for any follow-on disease or symptoms that they might have. The expansion to the 20 airports, now there are no longer flights coming from Wuhan to the United States.
Okay, now he did say the expansion to the 20 airports. So there's 20 different airports.
At this point, these 20 quarantine stations are our active quarantine.
So are they airports or quarantine stations? Or now they're going to call the airport a quarantine station? Because in 2 sentences, he just said 2 different fucking things. Yeah, the expansion to 20 airports. Now these quarantine stations, are they synonymous with one and the same? Is that the same thing? The airport and a quarantine station is the same thing, right?
The expansion to the 20 airports, now there are no longer flights coming from Wuhan to the United States. At this point, these 20 quarantine stations are our active quarantine stations. We have enhanced staffing there. And at those quarantine stations, we monitor for any signs of illness from any individual coming from China, but also just generally, we're always on the lookout. That's what we do, on the lookout for anyone coming into the country who's presenting signs and symptoms of disease, working very closely with our partners at Customs and Border Patrol, for instance, as well as information received from pilots or flight attendants, crews of airliners. Let me ask Dr. Messonnier if there's any other clarification on that.
Just maybe the clarification that think of screening as part of a layered approach that we use to protect Americans. And so screening at the airport is an opportunity to identify ill passengers, an opportunity to educate people. But we know that several of our patients of the 5 patients that we have in the U.S. now, came into the U.S. before we had stood up screening, didn't have symptoms at the airport. They themselves understood that they were potentially at risk. And when they had respiratory symptoms, they told their healthcare providers. That's how they were identified, diagnosed, and that's how we're able to work to control this outbreak. So screening at the airport is important. Screening passengers returning from China will be something that we'll be starting on a rolling basis to enhance our activity at all 20 of those quarantine stations. But it is only one piece of a multi-layered strategy.
And then we can go to the thank you.
Rita Chen with Radio Free Asia. I would like to follow up on the U.S. evacuate its own citizen from Wuhan. The WHO Director General just addressed that he thinks that the action like that is unnecessary. So what's your response to that? And do you trust the WHO and China's ability of managing the crisis this time? Thank you.
So we will take all steps that we feel are necessary to protect American citizens. I'm not aware of any critique from my good friend Dr. Tedros regarding the United States action with regard to extricating our consulate individuals and their family members. But we will take whatever we believe is necessary to protect Americans. We have an excellent relationship with the World Health Organization. This is what we do. We work constantly together. We've been working on the Ebola crisis in the Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo. This is what we do. And so I have great confidence in the World Health Organization and our constant collaboration together to deal with emerging infectious disease threats. It's remember the most important thing that we can do to keep disease coming into the United States is to stop and contain disease away from the United States. And so we try to work very actively with our international partners to do that. You want ABC again? Yeah. NBC, sorry.
China.
Mike.
There seems to be perhaps a conflict between U.S. and Chinese authorities on whether or not this disease is contagious before symptoms appear. What is the CDC saying?
The Chinese have reported evidence of transmission in the asymptomatic phase based on data that they have reviewed. CDC has not been given the opportunity to review that data.
Asymptomatic transmission. Yo, my back knee is acting up, yo. My shoulders are itchy as shit. But anyway, asymptomatic transmission is when you feel fine. I feel normal, like it's an average day, and you're still able to infect other people with the virus because you just don't know you have it yet. And that's the scariest part. It's like, it's not when you're fucking vomiting and nauseous and fucking shaking and sweating. Like when people know you're sick, like, yo, you look bad. Like, you don't look good. And then people know, like, to stay the fuck away. But this shit is just like, yo, you have that shit for fucking 10, 12 days. Feeling like there's nothing wrong. And at the same time, if you do just cough a little bit or some shit, you fucking everybody up around you. And China's fudging their fucking numbers, yo. It's way more people. It's way more people infected with that shit than they're saying.
So when we say, what we say is we haven't been able to confirm by data the impact of transmission during the asymptomatic phase. The Chinese believe they have that data. So this is, again, our hope as we could get more directly involved in China to be able to review and be more definitive. We have a limited experience here, as Dr. Messens already said, 5 cases. We're evaluating now a number of contacts. In the context of those evaluations, we are trying to address this issue. Is there any evidence of shedding of the virus in any of these contacts before? But we're going to present the data that we have, and we're not necessarily going to affirm someone else's interpretation. So that's why you see the differences. We haven't seen that data to confirm that conclusion. Dr. Fauci?
Yeah. To just add one thing that seems to get lost in that question is that, as Bob said, and I agree, we would really like to see the data, because if there is asymptomatic transmission, it impacts certain policies that you do regarding screening, et cetera. But the one thing historically people need to realize, that even if there is some asymptomatic transmission, in all the history of respiratory-borne viruses of any type, asymptomatic transmission has never been the driver of outbreaks. The driver of outbreaks is always a symptomatic person. Even if there's a rare asymptomatic person that might transmit, an epidemic is not driven by asymptomatic carriers.
Thank you very much. Donna, one last question. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, the World Health Organization just announced that that China has agreed to let international experts go ahead and work there with them. So I wanted to get an update from you on that. And
well, I've been standing on the stage, so I didn't hear that. But obviously, if that is the case, delighted with that news, and delighted, and assuming CDC personnel would be part of that, but would be delighted.
And then I wanted to ask you about funding. Have you already been in touch with members of Congress about potentially seeking additional funding for the research going on at NIH, or anything else at CDC that they may require, any emergency funding that you may request?
So by a declaration that I made, a determination on Saturday under our infectious disease rapid response fund that Congress funded in 2019, I was able to, working with OMB, to enable $105 million of funding to be directed towards the response, the preparedness and response activities immediately. We will keep at OMB to enable $105 million of funding to be directed towards the response, the preparedness and response infectious disease rapid response fund that Congress funded in 2019. I was able to, working with OMB, to enable $105 million of funding to be directed towards the response, the preparedness and response activities immediately. We will keep assessing based on the emerging nature of the preparedness and response activities what's needed. I, of course, have various secretarial transfer authorities that working with, under the direction of OMB and working with Congress, can be implicated. And, of course, we'll work with the Office of Management and Budget if there ever were a need for additional funding from Congress. We'll take the steps necessary to protect the American people. Funding won't be the barrier to that. Thank you all very much, and we're going to keep doing meetings, conferences. We want to be, as I said, completely transparent with the American people about the situation we're facing, and we'll be learning new information every day as we go through this. But thank you for being here with us today. Thank you.
Hi, sir, you wanted to see me?
Yes, that night. Please take a seat.
Outbreak in any other city, you know? It's interesting. Paulo says he thinks the spike is caused by Tech Bat's results timing. I suspect a batch of results from the 26th crossed over to 27th. The trend is consistent. So Paulo thinks there's something with the testing that's causing this, the number arise to be less today. Jamie Todd thinks they're running low on testing materials. Thank you, by the way, to Paulo Souza. Thank you also to Dusty from Canada. Dusty says, I wonder how many infected people are all over the world on cruise ships right now. I have no idea. It's a good question. The report of the week says, in my personal opinion, it's not on the decline yet. If anything, the other provinces are starting to experience even more infections. The spread in Germany and Japan is concerning too. BC Quake Help is wondering if the high numbers on Monday were some kind of carryover from the weekend. The thing is, they've been announcing numbers every day, so I don't know why that would be. They announced they didn't take days off from announcements from the weekend. Stock Social is wondering if the testing is backlogged. Oh, Monty the Full sent me this. I didn't see this. Australian citizens in Wuhan will be evacuated and sent to Christmas Island, where they will be quarantined for 14 days. So they send them there for 14 days so they can see if they have the virus or not. Christmas Island. There's Christmas Island, all the way up there. So the Wuhan, it's an Australian territory. That's interesting. That's where the people from Wuhan in Australia who are leaving, the Australians who are leaving Wuhan are going to Christmas Island for 14 days. Wow. I see some golf courses there. No, that's not a golf course, is it? Or is it? No, it's not a golf course. I thought it was a golf course. I was like, wow, it seems like a remote golf course. It's not a golf course. It's just, there's not much on there. Not much on the island. There's an airstrip there. Look. Christmas Island Airport.
Never heard of
It's a national park, covers much of the island. It's a national park. It's Australian. It's a ways away from mainland Australia, though. Interesting. John Duffy, our viewer, says many provinces reporting small quantities of recoveries with no deaths. He pointed that out.
132 dead, 6,061 confirmed cases. And this is what China itself is posting. Over 6,000 confirmed cases and 132 people dead already. I mean, somebody should write this shit into a movie where this is the reason that the world breaks down is because of some fish market, like some random fish market virus that they couldn't get a hold on. But they're saying that the 5 cases in America were direct contact. It was 5 different individuals who had visited Wuhan and came back to the States and tested positive for this shit.
Hey, thanks also for your kind words, Rosie McFluff.
And they're saying so far they haven't communicated the virus to anyone else. But how can you even say that when it's spreading so fast in China, but these 5 individuals come all the way back to America and they haven't infected anybody at all? It's just those 5 cases because they were in Wuhan?
Let's mute it. I don't know what it's going to say. Here's Wuhan. 7 hours ago. Oh, this is the video. She said that there are people putting together masks. This is our viewer, Javon, suggested this video. Oh, look, there's a wedding photo of people with a wedding video of people in masks. Wuhan, China. See, everybody has a mask on.
Agenda-free TV, guys. If y'all want to catch up on like some current news, like this dude searched the internet and gets all the.
Give me a shout on Twitter at Lookner. If you have comments, if you have questions, if you
have your boy Steve Lookner, he be on top of it, yo. But agenda-free TV.
It's 9:51 a.m.
And it's a YouTube channel.
It's 9:51 a.m. and they're going to be doing they're going to be doing their update in China at 2 p.m. No, 3 p.m. 3 p.m. So it is 5 hours until their afternoon update. 5 hours until their afternoon update, because it's almost 10 a.m. and they're doing their afternoon update at 3 p.m. That's what they're doing. T. Ryan sent me this article. Oh, and Nate D said something about the New York Times article. What? Oh, yeah, so the New York Times article didn't have any. So, look, in that New York Times article, it said, like, a third of cases were the cases went up by a third today, but there are concerns that it could be due to there's a testing shortage, and so the cases could be underreported. But the thing is, I've seen the question would be, is the testing shortage any different today than it is yesterday to it is the day before? Now, maybe just because there's more cases, there's a bigger testing shortage. But if there's been a testing shortage every day, I don't know why that would, and if it was a similar testing shortage every day, I don't know why that would result in like such a big drop in Wuhan province. So I just don't know. I haven't seen any evidence that the testing shortage got worse yesterday. But again, there are more people getting tested. That's true. Who need to be tested. And then a viewer sent me this. Medical supplies run low. Now this is from 2 days ago. Yeah, there's plenty of articles out there that talk about a testing shortage. Shortage of mask suits, goggles. Yeah, so it's been known there's a shortage of test kits. It says here, in Zhaogan, patients reported only the most severe suspected cases were referred for diagnostic tests, and the rest were told to isolate themselves at home. So I'm interested in knowing what the deal. I don't have the facts on the testing and whether it's a lot, whether we have more people waiting to be tested. Thank you, Nate D, for sending that out.
All right, guys. I'm about to get out of here and take Mass to bed. Don't forget to keep up on this shit, like at least once a day. See what these fucking numbers are. And try to see if you can find whatever the CDC says for America about this shit, yo. Because, like I say, we have one of these things every year. They can be kind of tricky most of the time. Everybody gets away with it, but, you never know. This shit might blow over in a couple weeks, and, so far, like 130-something people dead worldwide. That's not terrible. It's so sad, for anybody to go, on some crazy shit like that. But globally, that's not a lot of people. So as long as we keep watching these numbers, make sure they ain't talking about like 10,000 people just dropped dead from some crazy ass shit, and we might be good. But I'll get y'all next time. Peace.